After a week of indications that the US are going to get involved in the Israeli-Iranian war, it has now happened. Yesterday night, US bombers have struck several targets of the nuclear program of the Iranians. And in this video, we're going to talk about what do we know so far, what were the Iranian preparations, how has the attack happened, what are the likely damages, what else has happened in Iran, what were the Israeli attacks against military, nuclear program and the regime. We'll also speculate how Iran can handle the nuclear program after that, and we'll do some speculation about the Iranian reactions to this, as so far not much has happened yet, at least at the time where the research for this episode was finished. As said, all of this here in this sitrep about the Israeli-Iranian war. The Israelis continue striking TELs, transporter erector launcher of ballistic missiles, as well as storage facilities. There is a consistent number of videos being published and informations being published about the continued strikes. I'm not going to go into everything in every detail here because there's no point anymore at this point, because it's with such a regularity. The Israelis are still saying, though, that they managed to hit TELs several times again and again when they are in preparation to launch. So according to the Israelis, they managed to stop at least some of the strikes against Israel before they even happen by destroying the TELs with their missiles still on them. They have asked the Iranians to evacuate the area around the Sefi-Drot industrial facility. Later, they have struck it, and in that facility, there's the Navit composite material company, which is sanctioned by the US since 2013. This factory is producing carbon fiber parts for missiles, according to the US assessment. And the Iranians have also been hit at their solid fuel engine production in Sharut, which is run by the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. So the attacks against not just the missile launchers, the missile storage sites, but also the production sites are continuing. Another strike has happened against the Imam Hussein facility, where Khorramshahr missiles are being stored and from where they are being launched. According to the Israelis, 60 of these missiles have already been launched from there against Israel. Additional attacks were happening against air defense facilities, against command centers, against storage sites for UAVs, and in total, there have been hundreds of attacks against the missile capabilities of Iran over the past few days. The Israelis also strike other targets. We see here strikes against radar systems. They also struck close to Bushehr, both the aerodrome, basically the airbase, as well as the radar systems there. They've struck additional air defense facilities, and they struck numerous IRGC bases, mostly connected with the missile program, but not exclusively. And those of you who like airplanes, you better get tissues, because we have additional videos of the Israelis destroying 3 more F-14, which by some are being considered one of the most beautiful planes, and Iran is the only remaining operator of those, and 3 more of them have been destroyed on the ground by the Israelis. The Israelis also kept striking the nuclear program. They've struck the SPND nuclear project. It was involved in the research for the nuclear weapons program prior to 2003. They also killed another nuclear scientist in a targeted strike, and Isfahan was also struck by an additional attack by the Israelis. Ukraine has developed the sky-sentinel AI weapons platform. This system is used to shoot down attack drones like the Shahid drones and like Geran 2. In optimal conditions, it can even shoot down cruise missiles. United 24, the 8 platform, is now looking to finance 10 of these weapon platforms for 1.5 million. If you have some money to spare and want to help save Ukrainian lives, then please donate with the link in the description or scan the QR code. The decapitation strikes are also continuing. The Israelis say that they killed the Quds commander who was responsible for weapon transfers to the proxies. So Quds Force is a part of the IRGC that is responsible for the operations outside of Iran. And according to the Israelis, the guy they killed there was the one responsible for transferring weapons to the proxies, so to Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. They also killed the Quds Palestine Corps commander. He was responsible for organizing the financing of Hamas. And according to Israel, he was one of the architects of October 7th. That he was killed by the Israelis as well. And they killed the IRGC drone unit commander. He was the successor of the guy in the same position who was killed on the 13th of June. So he lasted barely longer than a week until the Israelis killed him as well. And as the Israelis keep killing high-ranking figures in Iran, we now have, according to the New York Times, the information that Khamenei, the spiritual leader, basically effectively the dictator, has made sure that a succession crisis will not follow with him being killed. Right now, he's in a bunker, and according to reports, he's only communicating over messengers, that he's not using any digital means, and according to reports, he has not allowed former regime figures to even meet him. Former presidents, for instance, tried to contact him and were not able to contact him. That's clearly to isolate him as much as possible, so he will not be killed by the Israelis. He has appointed or recommended 3 other Shiite clerics as potential successors to himself, and his son, who was considered to be his likely or potential successor, is not among them. Usually the negotiations of the institutional organization inside of Iran to appoint a successor to a supreme leader takes months. But now, with just 3 recommendations, this body will have obviously a much easier time to find somebody. While those recommendations are not necessarily to be followed, the majority will likely do so, and thus the election of a successor of Khamenei should be fairly fast in case he's being killed. So this is going to help to maintain the control for the regime. The Supreme Commander isn't just the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He's also basically controlling everything inside of government with direct or indirect control. He's the dictator, he's the one who decides everything. He also made sure that there's a succession already predetermined for high military figures to allow for easier taking of command in the future. And we simply have to say this is smart. This is a smart action by the current regime, because it will make decapitation strikes far less efficient. Decapitation strikes have the huge advantage that for a time the decapitated unit is headless, as the name says. So coordination of countermeasures is difficult. There's no clear knowledge who is now in command. There is chaos, and thus much easier for an opponent. But by him simply making sure there is a line of succession that can follow up immediately, any decapitation strike will lose a lot of its potential at this point and make it much, much faster for the successors to take over command. That's again a very smart measurement by the Iranian regime to harden itself against the Israelis in this war. And at the same time, obviously, it also makes it much easier for the regime to remain in control, as there won't be any power vacuum once a decapitation strike has happened. The succession is more or less determined. But this at the same time shows us those are clear preparations for a prolonged conflict, and a hint that a negotiated settlement is highly unlikely, as the Iranians had plenty of opportunities to go ahead with a serious proposal or with accepting the Western proposals, and right now they clearly are on a war footing and are willing to continue this conflict. The Iranians also struck Israel again. According to Israel, 99% of the drones fired at Israel were intercepted, but now we have the first confirmed hit by a drone inside of Israel. Also, after the American attack, the Iranians started 30 ballistic missiles against Israel. And out of those 30 missiles, 10 hits were achieved, so 1/3 success rate. 80 persons in Israel were wounded, and it shows us that the success rate goes up. This might indicate higher technology missiles, so that the Iranians are now using better missiles, or it might be a hint that the interceptors for the air defense systems and the anti-ballistic missile systems of the Iranians are slowly running out. This is something that is being discussed among analysts for quite a while now, for a couple of days, whether or not the Israelis are still capable of intercepting at full strength. The numbers now with the fairly high success rate seems to indicate that the first batteries might have mostly run dry or even completely run dry. Now let's talk about the US involvement, because the US have struck 3 facilities inside of Iran. The codename was Operation Midnight Hammer, and according to the Atlantic, the journal, on Wednesday, it was decided to do the strike. The claims, the things they said, the US government said on Thursday, were that additional negotiations were happening and that they were giving it 2 more weeks, etc., were camouflage, according to this, to distract from the actual plan to strike. This was now, the strike was done with B-2 bombers, and it was the longest B-2 strike since 2001. In total, 37 hours. Uninterrupted flight with aerial refueling. The pilots have a small bed to take a rest. They have a toilet and they have a microwave, so they are fully equipped in there for long operations. And in this case, they did operate. They were using the massive ordnance penetrator, the GBU-57. It has a weight of 13.6 metric tons. It has 2,600 kilograms of explosive and can penetrate deep into the earth. The B-2 can carry 2 of them. The only disadvantage of this weapon is that it only detonates once it has come to rest. So theoretically, it can punch through a target and continue penetrating downwards afterward. This is a disadvantage, a known disadvantage by the GBU-57, which in this case might cause some problems or not. This is something where further battle damage assessment will have to be said, as obviously it would still create massive damage and vibrations, which could damage highly sensible equipment like centrifuges. The B-2s were also, some B-2s were also sent to Guam in the Pacific, and according to the US military, this was done to distract the public. In total, according to the briefing, 7 B-2 bombers were used. They were refueled several times in flight, and according to the US military, a US submarine has launched cruise missiles against the nuclear facility in Isfahan before the bombers entered Iran. Over Iran itself, according to the US military, the bombers received escorts, likely the F-22 that were recently deployed to the Middle East. But the interesting part is that according to the US government, ahead of the bombers, there were planes of the 4th generation as well, so not just 5th generation like F-22 and F-35, which are stealth planes, but also 4th generation, for instance, F-16, F-15, or FA-18s. They were used to clear the airspace in front of the bombers, and they also did suppression of enemy air defense, either with F-16CJ or with EA-18G Growlers. They were suppressing the Iranian air defense. According to this explanation shows that the US were taking Iran's capabilities serious. Usually B-2s often operate alone without escort. In this case, they sent a massive air armada, including 4th generation planes, to allow to clear the area. This shows that they were afraid that they might lose something, or that they simply didn't want to take any risk. Interesting also, on the way to the target, they used high-speed suppression weapons. That's what they said. I think we are talking about the HARM, the high-speed anti-radiation missile that has received recent fame in Ukraine, as it is used by the Ukrainians to fight Russian air defense systems. This is a missile that can lock onto radar systems and then destroy them. And it seems they were used preemptively ahead of the group. So in case a radar system turns on just for a few seconds, that the missile is already in the air and will achieve a target lock and then dive towards the radar system. That can be a regular radar, a surveillance radar, as well as a radar system on top of a air defense vehicle. So regardless, unless that vehicle moves, it will be struck afterwards, even if it has moved. It seems likely that HARM were also used, and the US said they have not seen anything being fired at them. So the Iranians probably didn't manage to fire anything at the US. According to the US military, 14 of the massive ordnance penetrators, the GBU-57, were dropped against 2 target areas. With the Tomahawk being used against Isfahan, that makes it likely that Natanz was also hit by the GBU-59. We have now image analysis too, which is highly interesting. This shows the hits in Fordo in the enrichment plant underground, and we see that we can clearly identify 3 hits close to each other at 2 of the positions. According to reports, 6 of the B2s were used against Fordo. That would likely mean that into those openings there were several hits each time, as if those informations are true. 6 bombers were carrying 12 bombs, and we only see 6 hits. The area that was hit was likely the main hall, as well as the ventilation shaft. This is being seen in the battle damage assessment. The images we see so far indicate that we see here the line where in the past construction had been for the ventilation shaft, showing the accuracy of the system. We see it here at various points that we clearly have very accurate hits at weak points of the installation. This is a graph that was published, how it looks according to intelligence information, and 1 hit was here and 1 hit it was here, and there are 4 halls of 4 centrifuge cascades in that installation. So the 1 hit was in the main hall or at the main hall, and 1 was at the ventilation shaft. According to the US, 70 precision weapons were used, with 14 massive ordnance penetrators and 30 Tomahawks. That means probably 20 to 26 high-speed anti-radiation missiles were launched to suppress the Iranian air defense, which shows the volume of ammunition that was spent, where the US were willing to spend to make sure that no air defense can interfere. The report is that the capabilities of the installation were severely damaged. The report is a destruction of capabilities was done in Fordo, but this is important that we look at the wording. This does not say a destruction of the facility. It just says the capabilities were damaged. On Saturday, that's the interesting part that was reported by the BBC, that on Saturday Iran was informed that the attack is coming. According to that, it was told, this is all we are going to do. We plan to do, and we do not aim for regime change. So basically sit it out and it's all going to be over. And Iran was told precisely what is needed and what is aimed for, and they have now the ball on their side. They have now the choice to decide what to do. We also have the images of the damages in Isfahan. Here we can see the change in coloring, showing how installations, how buildings were destroyed here. And this shows the combined damage of the US as well as of the Israelis. The Iranians had prepared, though, for this, and this is interesting. First of all, we know if the American warning is correct, then this means that the Iranians had a chance to evacuate strategic personnel, which means if there was some high-class scientist or engineer in one of the facilities, the time was surely enough for him to evacuate it, and thus he will be available to the Iranians in the future. And we have imagery of trucks being at the installation. So there is a number of Maxar pictures from the area, and we see a lot of trucks in this area. We see covered trucks here that might have evacuated material, and we see 16 trucks here with a bulldozer. Those are likely open trucks for dump trucks. It's likely that they were trying to reinforce the entries, for instance, with earth or with sand, and the bulldozer was used to cover it. But these here might have evacuated something from the facility. This is, and if we take the numbers of a usual loading area of a truck, which is 13.5 meters by 2.4 meters by 2.6 meters, and we take at the same time the IR1 centrifuge that the Iranians are using, this would mean on one of those trucks without a trailer, 250 to 280 centrifuges would hit. This means if those 16 trucks, I mean, those were likely dump trucks, but if 16 trucks are evacuating, this would allow them to evacuate up to 4,480 centrifuges. But of course, this is one picture. It's quite possible that a lot more traffic was going on there with a lot more evacuations. If they have 4,480 centrifuges, this will be enough to enrich 60% uranium to 90%, which is needed for a nuclear weapon, in 22 to 23 days to achieve enough mass for a nuclear bomb, which is roughly 25 kilos with the usage of neutron reflectors. So if the Iranians, as they claim, we'll come to that really soon, if they claim that they managed to evacuate the enriched material, and if they managed to evacuate centrifuges, which is a pure speculation from my side, I can't emphasize this enough, as soon as they've set up a new centrifuge hall, as soon as it's working again, they would be able, within 22 to 23 days, to create enough material for a nuclear bomb based on uranium in this example. This is important to know, and I made a video about it where I explain how nuclear weapons work and why I believe that Iran was actually able to achieve a nuclear weapon really fast. I'm going to link this video to you here, where I go into detail why I think the Iranians were so close to the bomb. Let's continue a little bit with the speculation here, because obviously we want to know what that means. What does it lead to? Now, the Iranians said that they managed to get everything into safety. They say all the enriched material is safe, and as I explain in that video that I just mentioned, 60% is 90% of the way to achieve 90% enrichment. This is almost ready for usage. This is of an extremely high value to the Iranians, especially the moment they start losing centrifuges, because if you have already highly enriched uranium, then creating enough for nuclear bombs, you need a lot less centrifuges than you need if you start with natural uranium isotope mixture. So according to the IRGC, they managed to evacuate everything, and the general there said that we are not going to be empty-handed at the end of the war. They will have enough, and he said we evacuated all the facilities up front. Also, no heavy damage because all the materials were evacuated. Now, obviously, this could be propaganda to tell the domestic audience that everything is going to plan, despite the air above us being dominated by our enemies. But and the next thing would be, if it's true that they evacuated, is it just the uranium, or did they manage to evacuate centrifuges as well? If they managed to evacuate at least the uranium, the 60% is extremely valuable to them, and we have to understand that all the nuclear facilities that Iran had were initially not known. Iran built secret facilities all over the country, and it took a while to find them. This does not mean that right now every single facility that Iran has built or has prepared as a plan B is already known, that every position, every place that could be used to install centrifuges is known and in operation right now. Iran should have alternatives, especially as the West is very transparent. The existence of the GBU-57 is discussed left, right, and center in the media in the West, and it was even said the whole time it is designed to strike a facility like Fordo. So we would expect that Iran listened to this for years, for 1.5 decades that the West knows about the facilities and prepares weapons to destroy it without doing anything. So when we think about that they might have done something, I did some calculations. If the material was moved, Iran will need 14,350 centrifuges of their IR-1 type to have enough material within 1 week for a nuclear bomb. If they have 3,350 centrifuges, it'll take a month. With 1,120, it will take 3 months. All of this according to a 25 kilogram uranium-235 bomb with neutron reflectors. The centrifuges, I also did that calculation. The IR-1 are roughly 2 meters in height and 15 centimeters in diameter, which means roughly 280 fit into a truck. 4 trucks with centrifuges, just 4, would already mean it's enough for the Iranians to build a bomb in roughly 3 months. 12 of them would allow the Iranians to have enough material to create a bomb within a month, and 50 of them would be enough to enrich enough material for a bomb within 1 week. All of those are still just calculations with the IR-1. Iranians have already used the much more efficient IR-2M system. They were working on the IR-6 system too, but it still had some teething issues, so it might not be the right choice for it. But the IR-2M and the IR-6 are considered to be 5 to 10 times as efficient, so this might obviously change the calculations a lot different. Now, I also did the calculations how long it would take Iran to dismantle them if we consider them to be in operation, because they might have prepared everything once the war started. And I've made a video on last Monday predicting that the US is likely going to get involved in that war. I used that prediction not by using some magic powers, but simply by seeing transfer of tanker planes, which are a clear sign of a bigger operation. The Iranians might have done so as well and started disassembling the installations at that point. So centrifuges are organized in a cascade by 164 of them. With 10 technicians, they could be dismounted in 6 hours or even less. So if we assume 30 minutes per centrifuge, it might be a lot faster if they are if it's prepared. Especially every centrifuge has to be switched off, has to be removed from the system. It has to be flooded with fresh air to exchange gases inside, and it has to be dismounted, but only if it wasn't already prepared. Then of course it has to be packaged and it has to be put in the truck. So if we are very generous with the time, 10 technicians can probably fill 1 truck per day, and that's only with 10 technicians. So if they use more, they might even dismount and move a lot more centrifuges per day. To install them anew, they obviously need electricity, they need humidity and temperature control, they need a vibration dampening and a control of it, as we are talking about something with 60,000 rotations per minute. There can't be any mistakes here or the centrifuges destroy themselves. They will need a under pressure system for the UF6 gas, so the urane hexafluoride, to make sure that nothing is contaminated, especially as UF6 is highly reactive with water. They will need rust-free steel for the gas, and they obviously need security facilities to make sure there's no contamination, even though they might skip on some of it, at least if they are willing to take some risks. Obviously, the centrifuges have to be adjusted then, and that takes several hours per centrifuge, so that's not an easy task, especially as the centrifuges move that fast. But we have to understand that Iran was building its own centrifuges. A lot of the facilities are probably destroyed right now, but that leaves an option that there are secret facilities that are prepared to house evacuated centrifuges, or that even already have some that are not in operation just for a case like this. Because we need to understand this is one of the biggest projects in Iranian history, a massive investment, and something that Iran risked military confrontation over it. They know that Fordo is known since 2009. They know that the GBU-57 exists and is meant to destroy that. So we would have to expect that Iran was simply accepting this as a fact and didn't do anything, didn't create any plan B, didn't build any alternative. Now, just to emphasize, what I just said is theory and speculation. it's informed theory and speculation maybe, but I have not heard any evidence of this yet. And of course, intelligence agencies, both Mossad as well as CIA, are very efficient inside of Iran. They are never 100% successful. That's self-evident, but there is a decent chance that the Israelis or the US would find out if something like this is happening. But what I want to say is, we are far from a point where we can say this was it for the nuclear program, and we are far from a point where we could already with full conviction say that this is prevent an Iranian bomb for a long time. So right now, if we don't believe that the Iranians were just waiting for it to come down, then we need to accept that there might have been a plan B. Now let's talk about how the Iranians might react to the attack itself. We have a few options. They can use the Houthis to attack American ships, for instance, in the Red Sea, but there's not that many American civilian ships moving there. They could use their militias in Iraq against US forces there. In a past sitrep, I talked about 4 Shiite militias in Iraq having published that they have a plan of action in that case. So there might be some attacks fairly soon, but those militias aren't crazily equipped and crazily trained. So while they can cause losses on the US side, this is not an existential threat to those military facilities if the militias strike. And obviously, the one thing that is being said is that they might try to close the Strait of Hormuz, the strait that is connecting the Gulf of Oman with the Persian Gulf. Here is 20% of the world's oil and 20% of the world's LNG is passing through this. And the Iranians are preparing for decades to close that strait with missile boats, with mines, with submarines, with anti-ship missiles in case of a conflict exactly like this. But at the same time, obviously, the Gulf Cooperation Council as well as the US are preparing for that as well to prevent it in this case. And what we see here is from Iranian media that shows where the US have installations that could be attacked by them. They could also activate their sleeper cells against the US citizens and against Jews worldwide. This is considered to be a possibility. So US citizens worldwide might be in danger. Jews worldwide might be in danger, irregardless whether or not they're Israelis, because for Iran, they've always been a target, irrespective the question how they see Israel, whether they hold Israeli citizenships, they are being connected with Israel that Iran wants to wipe out. This is a real danger for them, but whether or not the US are actually going to use it is unclear, because those sleeper cells took decades to build up, and whether they would be used in a conflict that is not existential yet for the regime is obviously questionable, because it's a high risk to lose those networks for just a revenge strike. Then we have preparations in the Gulf states for a potential strike. I think Bahrain is reducing the workers in public offices, I think, to a 1/3. The rest is staying at home to reduce concentration of people in case of missile barrages. We have Kuwait opening its aircraft shelters. Reports like this are coming from all over the Gulf. It's unlikely that Iran is simply going to shell cities on the other side of the Persian Gulf, but those military bases of the US are obviously not hundreds of kilometers away from civilian areas. So even if they don't aim at civilians might still be struck, and this is where the Gulf is preparing itself for. If we talk about the overall, Iran basically only has bad options. They can strike back, but it's more like a kamikaze strike, so one that where they lose their own life doing this. At the same time, the nuclear program has, according to estimates, cost $500 billion for a country far poorer than the United States. And right now it looks like it's all gone, or mostly gone. This means that right now there's for the Iranians, there's a high likelihood of the sunk cost fallacy, that they say we spent $500 billion on this. We have now been bombed. We have lost so many military equipment, facilities, personnel. It can't be in vain. We need to keep going. We need to keep doing this. And I just gave you a theory how they could have saved parts or significant parts of the nuclear program. All of it is obviously theory, but this shows that it's far from over. And we have to say that Khamenei is not without reason supposedly the longest ruling dictator in the world. This shows that he knows how to handle crisis. And the experience with him in the past shows that he always considered weakness to just invite more weakness. So to give in into something would invite others to push further. So that he is giving in now, that the Iranian government is not going to react, and that the Iranian government will now say, okay, you beat us, let's be done with it, seems highly unlikely. The US are thus preparing. We have the informations here that 5 guided missile destroyers are in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. They should carry Tomahawks for strikes against Iran, but they also carry interceptors that can be used to help Israel. We also have additional reinforcements that have arrived in Saudi Arabia. We see here, it was counted 52 F-16 that have popped up here. There's a better picture here. This is a massive concentration, and those are only the planes that are visible in the open. This base is 600 kilometers away from Iran, so this gives the airbase enough time to prepare a defense, except for ballistic missiles. But even there, the time for those missiles to strike is longer, and thus allows for air defense to activate, etc. And it allows, obviously, to defeat drones that might come, as they would probably have a flying time of 2 hours or more, and thus would allow the planes to evacuate the area, for interceptors to rise up, etc., etc. So we see massive US troop concentration in striking distance of Iran. Especially here, we have a huge number of the tankers that were already used in allowing for that B-2 strike. We see here 27 KC-135 were counted on this one base alone, and there's a lot more tankers in the area after those past events. Then we have further informations about the Israelis trying to allow the Iranians to free themselves from the dictatorship. The headquarters for internal security and the headquarters of the special forces of internal security were struck. These would obviously help the regime to suppress riots, to suppress revolts, as they are exactly for that. We have further reports about IRGC losses. I said in the past that some of the IRG strikes, some of the strikes against the IRGC are because they are the ones handling the missiles, but some of them are definitely aimed to allow for a toppling of the government. The Israelis say that publicly now. We also have reports here where they said on their Farsi account that they attack the suppression methods of the government. So basically they are addressing the Iranians and tell them, we strike what is suppressing you to allow you to rise up. And there are reports here that they are intensifying those strikes against the IRGC and the Basij, which are the militia that is going to help the government suppress in case of an emergency. And they're also going to increase strikes against symbols of the regime. Without the IRGC, without the special forces of the internal security, and without the Basij, the regime is definitely under threat and definitely endangered. The coordination of any suppression requires headquarters. It requires leaders, personnel to give the orders, and those are being taken out with targeted strikes. So we see that the Israelis try to allow the Iranians to get away. But also in this, we have something interesting, which I do not want to hide from you. We see that they want to get the people out of Tehran to cripple the regime economically. As Tehran has a population of 9.8 million inhabitants, and the overall area there, the concentration with the suburbs, with the cities right around Tehran, those are 16.8 million inhabitants. That's almost 20% of the population of Iran. So there's no doubt that this would be destabilizing for the government if they stop working, if they don't do what they're supposed to, and if the rest of the country has to take care of them, has to feed them, has to house them. This would be massively stabilizing. We also need to understand, though, if the Iranians manage to make them flee, this should create some more loyalty towards the regime as well, because if you're being thrown out from your home, if you have to flee your home because of Israel, you might be less inclined to accept Israel as a helper, and you might be more pushed towards the regime itself and reinforce it against the foreign enemy. And then we also have to talk about international law, because reading this made me check international law. The international law clearly says that deportation, that expulsions of population, even inside of a country, are illegal, even if they aren't pushed out. The only thing that's legal are evacuations to secure the population, to keep it safe, or out of absolutely military necessity, that if a right of return is existent. Now, a right of return is clear. Of course, they can go home. And the interpretation of the paragraphs sounds to me more like we would understand that Israeli soldiers go from house to house and say, everyone pack your bags, leave, and never come back. But it tells us that this is probably not too far away from that line. Now, I'm not a legal expert, far from that. And legal experts should judge that. And there's a German joke that you have 3 lawyers and 4 opinions. So even if you find a legal expert who would say that's illegal, you will surely find 10 or 1 who says it's legal at the same time. But I guess it's not wrong to say that it's not too far away from the border between legal and illegal. On which side, though, I have no idea. But if I try to do this as unbiased as possible, if I try to do this as close to the facts as possible, then I should not ignore a fact like this, where according to the reports, the Israelis themselves said, in order to destabilize the regime and increase deterrence in response to missile fire on Iranian home front, while continuing to target facilities and scientists to thwart Iranian nuclear program. Must bring about a mass evacuation of the population from Tehran in order to destabilize the regime. That sounds to me at least a little fishy. It's probably not 100% kosher. But I said, I leave this for others to decide. I just don't want to hide something like this that is out in the open in front of us, where even I am somewhat like, not too sure about this. The Israelis keep striking. Other points as well. We have here a strike on the cyber headquarter of the cyber police. Obviously, that is likely to control internet and the actions of Iranian citizens on the internet. And while we talk about internet is re-established in Iran. And the explanations I heard from Iran itself are that it was turned off to find Mossad agents to prevent them from communicating with their base, to monitor any communication that goes out of this and find people much more easily. As it is turned on after 2 days or 3 days, 2.5 days, it's clearly that this was not the main reason that it's turned off to prevent riots or something. The Iranian explanation seems much more reasonable now as it's turned on again. Now let's talk about the political sphere as well. There have been talks with the Iranian foreign minister, with the European foreign ministers of Germany, France, and Great Britain, and they were useless. Iran is saying they don't want zero enrichment, but there's still good news because the Europeans have, according to reports, demanded zero enrichment. They also demanded restrictions in the missile program, I would guess, range and probably volume. Of how many missiles the Iranians are allowed to have, maybe warhead size as well, and a stop of the support of proxies, which are terrorist organizations. We have to say openly that would be close to a capitulation, obviously. I mean, the only thing they would still get is that they are allowed to keep any missile program at all, but it would be close to a capitulation and thus unlikely that the Iranians are giving in, but it's still good news as it shows a united front. In the last video in this series, I said that I see a huge risk there if the French, as it said, would allow the Iranians to keep a nuclear program. If they were to allow them, if they say from our perspective, you can keep enriching, that this would show a divided West and would allow Iran to hope that the European nations start pressuring Iran or start pressuring the US to stop their maximalist demands, to stop the fighting. And thus it would give Iran hope that it can continue, and thus it would help escalate the war, as those European nations would not be able to stop the US and they wouldn't be able to stop Israel as well. But at the same time, they would give Iran hope. So in interest of a quick peace, in interest of a quick solution, and in interest that Iran does not enrich, as according to my assessment, from everything we know, the only logical explanation is that they wanted to be ready to rush for the bomb as soon as they chose to. A country that supports terrorists worldwide, that committed terrorist acts worldwide, and the only country in the world that is openly calling for the destruction of a nation that's a UN member. This is probably not a country you want to give nuclear weapons, and so this should be the goal. But with the Europeans being on side of the Americans, at least mostly, this shows that Iran cannot hope that it can divide the West and thus get away. The Iranians said that they are willing to negotiate and they could agree to a maximum enrichment of 3.67%. That would be enough for a civilian use, but this would obviously allow them to keep their centrifuges, to keep enriching, and that's something where the West wants to end it, as the enrichment to 60% of 400 kilos only makes sense in two contexts. First is to be ready to rush to the 90% to build a nuclear bomb, or the second would be a pure provocation of the West to show them the finger, basically. Now let's talk about the results of this, the conclusions, if we want it this way. Trump is hoping for new negotiations after that strike. He probably thinks he has solved the biggest issue and now talks can begin again. But we have to say Iran shows no sign of being willing to sign a ceasefire agreement, a contract that would fulfill the war goals of Israel, of Trump, and apparently the war goals of the big European nations either. The fact that the succession is already being planned shows that Iran is willing to keep fighting. The destruction of the facilities, even if it was successful, is going to push Iran back, but only temporarily. Iran has the knowledge, and the destruction of archives and the killing of scientists will not erase that. That they might have rescued material, that they might have even rescued centrifuges, let alone a theory that there might be some hidden ones, means it's only a temporary solution, a temporary pushing back of the Iranian path for a bomb, but not a permanent solution. Iran will try to rebuild without any contract that includes strict observance, strict checkups, whether or not Iran is starting to enrich on itself again. It's only pushed back a couple of years at best. So without a contract, without international control, and without regime change, which might be a solution as well, as a new regime might not be hostile towards Israel and the West, a new regime might give up the nuclear program as a waste of money, understanding that the West is not willing to allow it to them, how to continue if neither contract nor international control nor regime change is coming? Are we to expect airstrikes every few weeks or every few months for eternity? Are we going to expect that every time the Iranians start drilling into a mountain, whether it's for a tunnel or for an installation, the drilling site is going to be bombed and the workers, which are civilians, are going to be killed to stop a potential nuclear facility from being established? Because Fordo has been under a 60-meter mountain hill, and if it's built with an angle, it was probably 80 to 90 meters steep. If the GBU-57 can still reach it, and there's actually debate whether or not it was able to, and we'll see that in the midterm. Next time they might just build the tunnel into a 200-meter mountain range or into a 300-meter mountain range. So is the future that every time the Iranians start drilling into a wall, it's going to be bombed and everyone is going to be killed? That doesn't seem like a logical way. So Trump has probably stopped the Iranian march to a nuclear bomb. If they made the decision, and I said in the past, from my point of view, the Iranians had no more inhibition, nothing to stop them anymore after the Israelis started striking. So from their point of view, I would have at least at that point started the sprint towards the bomb. He might have stopped that, not even sure he has 100%, but it's far from certain that this is permanently it rather looks like it might not be permanently. So the news aren't too great in total. The strike was likely successful, but if the Iranians do not, their propaganda is not, this is not just propaganda that they saved equipment and material. It might just show up as a new problem fairly soon again, especially if they manage to get the highly enriched material away. As I said, 1,200 centrifuges roughly are enough to use with these enriched material to create the material for one nuclear bomb within just 3 months. Finally, on a light note, timing is important. Pakistan condemns US strike against Iran 1 day after nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. irony exists in the world as well, and I didn't want to hold that back on you either, to finish this with on a light note. That was it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment if you have something to add, and if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. This channel is only possible because of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.